You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me on another edition of Inside Automotive right here at the CBT Automotive Network. Today we're joined by Tom Maoli, President and CEO of Celebrity Motorcar, a dealer who's never afraid to share his perspective, especially when it comes to how policy and politics impact our great industry. So today we are learning how his operations are performing in today's crazy market and how his team has handled the recent EV tax credit changes. So Tom, thank you so much for joining us on the show once again.
Always good to see you.
You, as I mentioned before we got going, you are in the middle of one heck of a gubernatorial race there, and I know that you're pulling for the GOP guy and the Republican. Talk to us a little bit about that.
You know, listen, Jack's a great guy. He's a friend of mine. I'm on his finance committee. We've done a lot of fundraisers. I'm going to actually see him this evening at a fundraiser in New Jersey. And, we had a good conversation yesterday because he kind of got punched in the stomach with this whole opioids thing, in his past life supporting opioids, which they say that his advertising company took on a campaign for opioids. But, listen, I had the conversation with him yesterday. Opioids are legal. He didn't do anything illegal.
Right.
What's bad about the opioids is the addiction part of it, but they are legal. They have a purpose in it.
Sure.
My 90-year-old mother fell and broke 4 ribs. She's on opioids. Yeah. So it has a purpose and a place in the marketplace. So what she's insinuating that he's a murderer and he killed people and children is absolutely bizarre. And I think it's going to go against her.
Yeah, for sure. And things, it would be a total shift from the previous administration and the previous governor's viewpoint on business and such there with Murphy there in New Jersey, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen, if Jack gets in, the world's going to change. We're back to a Republican state, which is pro-business, bringing corporations back to New Jersey, not chasing them out,
sure,
bringing tax dollars back, and getting rid of the red tape regulations. That's really what slows business down.
Right. No question about it. So let's talk a little bit about your operations today. How are sales? What is inventory looking like where you stand right now?
Listen, inventory is still thin out there, Jim. It's really interesting. The manufacturers are holding back. They're not producing, which is keeping margins up. And sales are good. Listen, we're off about 10%, 8 to 10% from last year, on a profitability standpoint, but sales are still out there. People need cars. Service departments are busting at the seams because we're long in the tooth. People have been holding on to these cars since COVID and repairing them and gluing them together. And we're going to come into a cycle, and I think it's coming soon, probably in the next 12 months, where inventories are going to have to boost, or else used car prices are going to go out the roof because you can't keep repairing.
Right.
There's only so much that you could do, brakes, tires, that kind of stuff,
sure,
maintenance stuff you do. But when you start getting 150,000 miles, 180,000 miles on an engine, a transmission, we're looking at the end of the life cycle.
Yeah, for sure. I just had an interview with Cox Automotive, and they mentioned that in their new study, the transaction price has now exceeded $50,000, the average transaction price. Affordability is still at the forefront of everybody's minds, right? Consumers, dealers, OEM executives, and such. This is a reality that we're going to have to face somewhere along the line, right?
Yeah, listen, I don't know what the Federal Reserve is looking at and what the government's looking at, and I'm I'm a Trump supporter and a friend of his, but I got to tell you, I think inflation is out of control. I don't think we're at 2%. I think you're seeing grocery prices and housing prices and all of, consumer prices going up, on a quarterly basis. I do not see 2% inflation. I think we're more into 6 and 7s, and consumers are really hurting.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when you say that, what are you feeling? That's kind of a shock for me to hear you say that, because I know that you are a Trump supporter. You've been a big fan of his policies. What does that mean moving forward? What if you had his ear right now and you said, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z to get this under control? What would it be from your perspective?
Well, listen, he put the tariffs in place, and I think the tariffs were a great idea. I think what's happening though is it's causing some inflationary pressure on the consumer.
Yeah.
And running up the prices of vehicles, especially in our business, but all across the board. It's hurting the consumer. And I think he thinks that he's going to offset this by interest rates. He's pushing the Fed very hard to get interest rates down. And if he can get those interest rates back in the 4s or 3.5% range, he'll offset a lot of the tariff costs with interest rates and how deals are financed. The problem we're faced with right now is that's not happening. So the consumer's really hurting right now. And I think he may have to step back and pull back on tariffs if he can't get these interest rates down. The Fed is its own agency. It's really not run by the president of the United States, but he's pushing them hard.
Right. Yeah, that he is. He wants to put somebody new in there, that's for sure. And I would imagine, like the other appointees that he's had, it would be one of his guys or gals that would read off the same sheet of music to say, look, we got to lower rates, right?
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. As we sit here today, the president just came out and said, hey, China, 100% tariffs. When you hear that, obviously it's a concern of yours. What's your thinking on that? Is it just to get China's attention? Is there teeth in that? What's the deal?
Listen, it's an attention getter. He wants to get them to the table and he wants to get them to negotiate. China's got to start playing ball with us. I mean, It's not just on the automotive side, it's on technology side.
Sure.
This whole AI boom right now is, China's trying to do their own thing, and realistically, they have to come to the table and they got to buy American products. And I think that's going to happen. It's happening. There's cracks in the ice. It's happening now. Licensings are being issued for technology companies to sell their products into China. China's boycotting them, but I think they can only boycott them so long. You look at a company like NVIDIA, their chips are second to none. So you could boycott all you want, but if you want quality and you want the best of the best in the industry, you're going to have to buy NVIDIA chips.
Yeah, no question. So, when I talk to dealers around the country, they have a similar report that you have, which is service is just killing it. They're selling the cars that they're selling. The profitability wasn't what it was, obviously, 4 or 5 years ago per car. They understand that. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like we're talking at all about chasing this 17.5 million SAR anymore. If we do 16 million vehicles and we make money at it and we got a strong fixed ops department, we're good. We're okay. Rather than trying to do this race to the bottom with a 3 or 4 month supply of vehicles behind the dealership to try to get them out just to chase 17.5 million SAR, they're like, don't worry about that. Let's just make money in our operation.
No, correct. And listen, that's where the industry has changed, and it's a post-COVID, change. But I think we're going to stick here. It's very interesting because back in the late '80s, early '90s, I wasn't in the car business. I was in the logistics business, and the world was talking about just-in-time inventory.
Yeah.
I service technology companies like Motorola and Cisco, and they were talking about just-in-time inventory, having just enough.
Yeah.
Finally, the car business caught up to it, and here we are. We're in just-in-time inventory, and I think it's going to stay this way.
That's right. Switching gears a little bit on the EV tax credit, obviously ended September 30th. What impact did that have in your business? What impact do you think it will have moving forward? Obviously, we hit 12% EVs sales last month, which I guess was good news because everybody said, well, wait a minute, 12% of the market wants an EV? Maybe we miscalculated here. But what's your take on that?
Listen, I think EVs, as I've been saying, they'll have a place in the marketplace. I think they're reaching their saturation point at 12, maybe 15% of the marketplace. We don't deal in EVs. We don't take EVs on trade. Our consumers don't want them here in New Jersey and the Northeast. Listen, I think it was brilliant what they did. They made Sean Duffy, head of the National Transportation, Secretary of Transportation, basically crushed this EV credit. Sean's another friend of mine. I speak to him often, and he's not for EVs. The infrastructure is not there, and it works in certain cities. And I don't think you're going to see the government pushing it for a long time, like they did, like the Biden administration did.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to let the river take its course, and I think it's reached its saturation. And I think you're going to see some pullback. What you have companies like, Mercedes pulling out of the marketplace, Lexus pulling out of the marketplace for EVs, going to hybrids. So what that does is, we have to get rid of the inventories. We're discounting them, and they're moving it. So it looks like the numbers are up, but the reality of it is they're going to come back down. And I think ultimately it helps Tesla because Tesla is going to be the largest player in the game. Before, Tesla had all this competition, but all that competition is going away, and it's ultimately going to help Tesla.
Yeah, they probably will come out the winner, that's for sure. But imagine that, Elon Musk getting a little richer than he already is. That's what he needs, right?
Exactly.
So as we close out the last quarter of 2025, what are you most focused on for your operation to say, look, in order to hit the numbers that we want to hit, this is what my team really has to hone in on and focus on? What is that?
Well, listen, it's market saturation. Right now, the game is market penetration in your PMA, in your area, because what you want is you want the people to come back and service their vehicles. You don't want to be selling outside the marketplace because we don't have the inventory. If I start selling cars into New York City and, upstate New York, it just doesn't work because those people aren't going to come back and service the vehicles. So we want to hold on to them. We want to keep our margins tight, and we want to sell in the zip codes that people are going to come back and service their vehicles. And I think all dealers are looking at that really seriously. I think, the old days when the broker business and they were selling cars into, other areas just to get volume, I think those days are over.
Yeah, for sure. I know your daughter runs the Ford store. She's crushing it. Jim Farley just came out recently and said he's got 6,000 service bays without technicians.
Yes.
That's a reality, right? Where do you guys stand on that, and what can the industry do to change that?
Listen, I think the manufacturers have to continue to push hard with training programs. It's a phenomenon because the next generation, when I grew up, there was trade schools. You could go and get automotive training and, and learn how to fix a car. Today, the next generation doesn't want to do that. They're working on computers and they're making a lot more money than they can working on cars.
Yeah.
So, it's a struggle. And, I think when you look at brands like Ford and General Motors, because the consumer doesn't have the pocketbook to be able to pay the rates that they can in a luxury brand, it's going to get harder and harder. Yeah,
I would agree. Last question, leasing. Is it back to pre-COVID levels? I mean, you guys were doing a boatload of leasing there in Jersey. Where does that stand? And how come OEMs aren't doing more subvented programs to combat the high price of a new car?
Well, listen, leasing is coming back. It's not what it was. I'm not saying it'll never be, but it's not what it was. It's going to take a long time. The reason the manufacturers aren't combating that with leasing programs is because they got stuck with so many vehicles that they leased out, came back with high mileage on it. Yeah. They had to run them through the auctions and take major losses, and they don't have to do that anymore. Used car prices are up. Cars that come back in, you can turn them and make a profit on them and clean them up and recon them in the shop and make money on them. So the manufacturer's gotten smart. Yes, leasing is important because it brings down the pricing, but the manufacturer would rather sell a vehicle.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, crazy. Tom Maoli, the president and CEO of Celebrity Motorcar. Man, it's always great catching up. You got such great information for our dealer body out there that listens to us each morning, and we always get great comments whenever you're on. So thank you so much. I hope your guy wins, by the way. So
we'll keep you posted.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.